Yeah.
Jay, are you ready to lead us through decentralized identity? We got so excited
Yeah,
for
I think so. I'm going to turn off my video, so hopefully it's faster on the screen share. So,
and guys, the slides are linked from our meetings page. If you want
okay,
to follow
so
along.
hopefully you can see that.
Yep.
Yes.
Let me see if I can. There we go. Good. Awesome. All right. So this is I'll try to keep this to like 10 minutes or so and just sort of do a run through overview, but I've been involved in identity and decentralized identity for a long, long time. I come from a telecom background, and the AT&Ts and the Verizons of the world have wrestled with, I think, some of the same problems that are coming up now around identity, identifiers, and so forth. So here's a little presentation that I put together to kind of highlight a few things. And I'm calling it viable decentralized identity. And the viable word is important because there's a whole bunch of initiatives out there to introduce decentralized identity. And, the question that I think is often missed, and I've seen groups put years and years of efforts into various standards and initiatives and so forth. And, lo and behold, it's really not viable. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind as we talk about this issue of decentralized identity. And I'll go through a few quick introduction or definitions, and then I assert that decentralized identity is elusive, and there are numerous entities and groups and so forth that are trying to get their arms around decentralized identity, and it seems to fail over and over. I think not the least of which is Mr. Musk with his purchase of Twitter seems to be running into some rather significant, what I would assert are decentralized identity issues. And this is just, keep in mind, this is just sort of a rough draft of an updated presentation. So some of this doesn't map exactly to the content that's in here, but I'm going to go over what I've been involved with that was tried in the past, which is called electronic number mapping, which was launched by the telecoms back in the late 90s and basically failed. And it's still alive behind the scenes in all of our mobile networks, but it never achieved what it was originally envisioned to do. And I assert the next point is, why does viable decentralized identity matter? I think it's, from my view, it's coming up over and over in multiple contexts, multiple dimensions, and it seems to be one of the key elements to usher in a usable decentralized web that actually works and delivers, what we're all hoping to see happen. I don't think I went into who's pursuing the decentralized identity, but suffice it to say that there's a bunch of people. So here's just kind of a laundry list of some of the dimensions that I think make this particularly elusive. Centralized identity versus decentralized identity, again, to use Mr. Musk as an example. I think when he created PayPal, he was, very attuned to centralized identity and how that worked and so forth. But now with Twitter, which is not exactly decentralized identity, but it's certainly closer to decentralized identity, I think that's starting to give him problems. And anyway, I could go on and on about that, but generally, the next point, attestation versus contest or attestation versus curative. Um, the the approach that I see most of the initiatives taking is attestation, which basically means Michael asserts that J is who J is, and J asserts who Michael is, and somehow we tease out authenticated identity from that. And I assert that is similar to basically the title image, or the image on the title slide, which is the snake eating its tail, and self-referential, basically. And then skin in the game, no skin in the game, bounded versus unbounded. I'm not going to go through all these. A big piece is human-friendly versus machine-friendly, particularly with the W3C and the DID's recommendation that it was deemed a recommendation in July that they've been working on for about 5 years now, instead of a standard. I think they stepped over the human-friendly side completely, and that's, again, makes the DID's initiative via the W3C I question the viability of it. New versus in use is sort of adoption, scaling, etc. I assert, and again, this is from my telecom background, where I've seen different addressing schemes introduced, and the adoption just never got off the ground. Trust versus distrust, I could go into a bunch of these things, but I'll just kind of skip into the definitions and so forth. So let's start with viable. Here's a definition: capable of working successfully, feasible. And again, I think that the viability of many of the initiatives that I've seen worked over time in various contexts are basically just not capable of working successfully or feasible for a number of reasons. What do we mean by decentralized? Well, to move the control of an organization or government from, can't quite read my slide here, but to several smaller ones. And, certainly I think what you're working on Braid is a really cool approach to how do you move this control and this state management and so forth from a centralized control construct to a decentralized. And identity is the fact of being who or what a person or thing is, and that gets very tricky, much trickier than you would think on the surface. And then the second definition, I think, is subtle but profound, which is a close similarity or affinity. And I think that is often lost in the attempts to structure a viable decentralized identity. So here's my little project that I introduced in the context of DWeb Camp. This is a really rough stab at basically pairing public keys with either telephone numbers or something that looks like telephone numbers. I won't go into any detail on that, but you can see in the middle of the screen, I'm using a toll-free number, the antiquated dinosaur that toll-free numbers are, 1-866-DWebCamp, as a easy to remember address, identifier, and so forth. And I think that's important. I think this is a realm that is overlooked. And I know some of you have been, some of you were on the HTMX session recently, which is a way to sort of take HTML and give it a simplified, more powerful functionality. And I think something similar might be available here using telephone number-like addresses. And I'll go into a little bit of that in a moment. So telephone numbers basically are dismissed as antiquated and blah, 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 but they've got some very interesting characteristics that I think can be leveraged in the decentralized identity realm. So here's a little video that actually Chad and Randy and I participated in HackFS in 2020, and we did a submission proposing a a directory of lookup numbers for HackFS, and this video goes into a little better explanation. But you can see again, here is something that's has at least a duality to it, if not a multiplicity, which is 1833 Hollywood, which is both simultaneously a number as well as a human-friendly phrase. And here you can see that teased out, where we have 1-833-465-5996, which is machine-friendly, but not human-friendly. And then the same identifier can be recast at the direction of the end user into 1833 Hollywood, which I assert is easy to remember. And I would expect that many of you the next time we meet could remember that particular identifier. So here is the failed electronic number mapping spec by the IETF, and that's been worked again since the late 90s. It is in use today, but it's not being used as it was originally envisioned, which was basically a way to create a harmonization among all of our disparate addresses, email addresses, phone numbers, physical addresses, social media. The idea was to have all these identifiers and locators work in some sort of harmony, and basically it collapsed under numerous dimensions. So this is a little item that I put together called the end user identity paradox. And this effectively I presented this at what I call the funeral for end user opt-in ENUM, and you can take a look at it. But this goes over, some of the dimensions that, at least in my view, I think could be a step towards having workable or viable decentralized identity. Here is the W3C did now recommendation as of July 19th, 2022. And I know that these folks kicked this off in basically 2017. So basically 5 years into it, they did a ton of work and hoping to get a specification, this classified as a specification, and it was sort of demoted to a recommendation. And in my view, this is horribly complex and, again, reduces the viability of this particular initiative. And it is almost completely void of human-friendly characteristics. Here's an example of a very simple example of a decentralized identifier. And, in my view, this is very much akin to the introduction of IPv6 versus IPv4. And, I consider IPv6 to be a questionably viable initiative to introduce a new set of identifiers and location addresses. So anyway, but that's this is a little bit about me. Here's sort of additional information. This is a presentation that I did at DWeb Camp on identity, privacy, and decentralization. And then this is another presentation I did just prior to DWeb Camp, referring to the DWeb Camp directory that I was working on. And I could be wrong, but I think this approach is possibly a workable way to square Zukov's triangle. So let's see, that's about it. So I don't know if that's 10 minutes or, but I'll stop sharing, turn my video back on. And
I think we've got
yeah,
plenty of time.
uh,
I'd be curious to, I don't know what you guys think, but I'd be really curious to hear more of the detail. It sounds like you have a lot of background thought here in these other presentations. And if it wouldn't be too much of a pain for you, I'd love to hear some of the details on what you think went wrong with the existing approaches. And it sounds like that leads to some problems where you see yourself being able to square the triangle. And I'd love to hear a little bit about that possible solution too.
so the very, let's say, difficult issue of branding and human-friendly names is generally shunned among the engineering initiatives that I've seen. And they don't want to sort out, if Jay Carpenter, how many Jay Carpenters are out there, who's going to be the Jay Carpenter, get jcarpenter.com, blah, blah, blah. And I think that the missing piece in that is a market mechanism that allows jcarpenter.com to go to the highest and best user. So I think that's been one of the biggest missing pieces out of the mix. And so in North America, in telephone numbering, up until December of 2019, it has been illegal to buy or sell a telephone number. So I worked for 6 years with the AT&Ts and Verizons, advising the Federal Communications Commission on how to introduce a market mechanism for allocation of telephone numbering. That was immediately shelved until, I don't know, 2012, 20 whatever. Anyway, eventually it surfaced, and there was the first market for the 833 toll-free numbers. It was a disaster. Out of, I think, 8 million toll-free telephone numbers, there were 1,900 that were auctioned off. And that was an unfortunate situation. Australia had a open market for telephone numbers, but that also had some very unfortunate dimensions to it, where they wouldn't show the phrase. It would be like having a market for real estate where the only thing you could show was the parcel number. You couldn't know where the location was at. You didn't know if it was in Midtown Manhattan or out in the middle of the Sahara Desert.
So they're auctioning off numbers without telling you what the numbers were?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That
Wait,
seems...
do they tell you the numbers or just not tell you the human words that correspond to the numbers?
Right. They showed you the numeric.
Oh, okay.
You had no idea what that numeric might spell. And the numerics, there's one numeric, and there could be a ton of different phrases associated with it. Yeah. For instance, 1-800-Napster also spells 1-800-MapQuest. Same numeric.
Just to name it with phone numbers, as an Australian, I don't think... I think the last time I saw the phone number described with words was when I was about 6 years old. Right. That's not a thing that anyone does anymore here, but yeah.
The functionality of phone numbers, this is like a nuisance anymore. And people don't even do this. They do this now for the gesture. The problem is what people don't realize, and if you look at that RFC 6116, telephone numbering could be as functional or more functional than internet domains. However, it's been this lack of policy, lack of implementation, and so forth. And so anyway, yeah.
What happened with it seemed like when you were describing the downfall of the American auction, it seems like you said that there were only 18,000 or 19,000 auctioned off out of a million. I think I misunderstood. Were you saying that was the issue that they foolishly chose to auction off so few? Was the issue that there was no interest? That's all that they could auction off? They tried to auction off a million, but only 19,000 were sold?
They had potentially 8 million numbers in the 833. So if you take the specification for E.164 numbering, you got 10 million potential numbers, but because of the specification, you can only have 8 million. Out of the 8 million, they had I don't know, maybe, well, the bottom line is they only sold 1,900 numbers. So,
but I guess did they try to sell more? Like, but people wouldn't buy them? Or
theoretically, they could have sold the entire 8 million numbers.
Like, I don't understand if the problem was that there weren't enough buyers, or if they were only.
Did they charge too much?
No.
Or was it just really inefficient market? No.
No, it was an incredibly cumbersome process, and again, there was no mention of the phrase, which is it was only the number. So
how much did they cost?
Well, the repeaters.
I feel like I would have bought 400 of these numbers if there is low amount of money.
Well, so the repeaters, like 1, 833, 3, and then all threes, would go for a couple $100,000. But I got 1 833 Hollywood for nothing.
Are they still being auctioned off?
They're not being auctioned off. There's 1,900 numbers out of probably 100 million or more numbers in North America that are legal to buy or sell, and that went through the 833 number auction.
Are you saying that if at that time of the auction, that if more people knew about it and grabbed those numbers, that there could be at this moment floating around 1 million numbers that are buy and sellable, but they won't redo the auction?
Yes. Yeah, it was.
This doesn't make any sense to me.
You have to understand that there's a whole different mindset in the telecom world around telephone numbering. So the metric is that there's about 300,000 or 400,000 phrases that are desirable, and that's been proved in various instances where 1-800 Walgreens, 1-800 Go FedEx, all that stuff. What I'm saying is the auction had no indication of what the numbers spelled. And the same thing happened in Australia. They shied away from publicizing the phrases, and I think it's because of their fear of trademark issues. But
I feel like I agree with Seth on I don't know that the names matter. I think they're cool. I actually do agree with you that numbers are cool. I think they're being used as identity right now. Like, as far as I know, Telegram on my phone, it seems to be tied to my phone number, not to my SIM card, not to anything but I think, I don't even know.
Yeah. WhatsApp, Twitter, I think Signal, Telegram, they're all telephone number centric.
And that makes it kind of sense. Like, it's not bad. But what I don't understand about this, like, if there were phone numbers sitting around, I feel like the issue is not that they didn't advertise mnemonics for these. I feel like the issue is like, I didn't know I could buy one, just knowing that I could, and why can't I now? Like
Is this a thing that we care about? Like, if we had a distributed naming system, does it matter how phone numbers work? Like, to me, that seems like technology from the 60s, not.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
like I'm saying,
So let me.
Telegram, Signal. Are you saying Signal is designed stupidly, that it should do something different than?
No. I'm not saying that. I'm saying every time I go to the supermarket, they don't ask me for my email address. They ask me for my phone number. And the reason is, there's multiple reasons, but it's a fixed length for one thing. And that has huge advantages versus an email address, which has a variable length. Here's where it would come into play in what you're working on. Imagine that there was a quadrillion numbers that were in sequential order that constituted a directory where you could start to use those quadrillion. And the reason I say quadrillion is because the ITU specification for telephone numbering limits it to 15 positions. So you can go from 15 zeros to 15 nines. You've got this very nice sequence of numbering that you can start to create a directory that becomes your authoritative source of truth. And you can start to pair effectively an infinite number of like subdomains in that they're called NAPTers, naming address pointing records. But everything you're talking about with state, I think you could find this to be, I call it like a Christmas tree, where you can start to hang ornaments on this Christmas tree. And all of a sudden, you've got a new repository for state that the end users can control the state. And Jay can have a traffic light on a particular context that we're talking about that goes from green to yellow to red, but I control it. And then all of you could look at that particular context, my traffic light on this authoritative source of truth, have confidence that it's Jay changing the signal on the traffic light, and you could start to key off of state that I'm in control of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it seems like this sort of interesting spot on because a lot of technical systems are either human readable, fully human readable, like something like email, or they go down like, say with my Ethereum wallet address, so my public key, which isn't human readable, but it's got like these other properties. And if it's human readable, then you're looking for a centralized system, because you need to be able to assign the names. So we've got like the domain name system. And what I'm hearing is something like a centralized system that would let you assign numbers because there's only a quadrillion of them, but where it's still not fully human readable, like a Twitter handle. And I suppose I'm like there's something kind of old school cool about it, but and like, as you say, like the supermarket asks your phone number, not your like email address. But at the same time, it seems worse to me than a name. If you're going to have a central authority assign the names, why not just have a central authority assign strings? And then we're not limited to the number. They can be human readable, like, they can have other nice properties.
I assume, I could be wrong. I assume, Jay, I assume there's infrastructure for the phone numbers that you're taking advantage of. Like, I assume that if the phone numbers didn't exist, that you wouldn't be coming here saying, hey, let's invent phone numbers. I assume that there's something that the phone numbers are already doing. And I'm kind of curious about that. Like, what is their infrastructure? Is it better than DNS?
I assert that it's better than DNS. And I assert that I would be coming to you saying, hey, there's a possibility of creating an authoritative source of truth that is decentralized, that could house state, could house a harmonization among addressing, and also trusted public keys. So I think, I won't go into all the reasons, but DNS is exactly opposite the phone numbers. So With DNS, you have one, let's say IPv4 address, or excuse me, you have one phrase, let's say braid.org, and you can map any IPv4, IPv6 address to that. It's exactly the opposite with telephone numbering. You have one number that is, 1-833-465-5996 that can spell Hollywood. It can spell other things like the Napster, the MapQuest. The same number spells that, and it's up to the subscriber to that number as to how they present it. Do they present it as MapQuest or Napster? And the phrase, the human-friendly side, is intrinsic to the address because you've got one number and multiple possible phrases. So
yeah, I'm still confused why having the number that then we can have phrases that are associated with, why that would be better than just having the string phrase and have the string phrase be the mnemonic and what's used everywhere.
Because you have no anchor with the string phrase.
Isn't the string the anchor?
No, I'm saying that you focus on the numeric, the machine-friendly side of it as your anchor. And
why not just make the string machine-friendly?
You can't.
Why not?
Because there's all sorts of variability with the strings.
So like Unicode stuff, like or Russian Cyrillic letters, is that your concern?
Well, there's also different.
There exists ASCII in Unicode. I assume Seth is saying that strings can be mapped in the numeric system via that, and you are saying no. What's the?
No, there are different nuances, and the same word can mean something completely different in a different context. Not to mention, you still need the market mechanism in order to sort out who is the highest and best user of the phrases. So the phrase side is closer to the DNS side.
Yeah. I guess I'm not seeing the benefit of having numbers separately from the names.
I get it.
Like all technical things seem solvable. Like maybe there's something else I'm not seeing. Like the market side, great, but we could just put a market on the names. Like that would work fine. Like the benefit of a public key is that it's got some real technical benefits, right? But it's like really long. But then a phone number wouldn't have that. And if you say, oh, we could have a sort of some Christmas tree, as you say, of signers and so on, we could do that with strings as well. In fact, we do with DNS. Well, we don't really with DNS, but we should do something much better. But you could build something like that if you wanted to. So yeah, I'm happy to be convinced.
So I get it. It's go ahead.
I'm actually very excited about phone numbers, but I agree with Seth completely about not because of the numerics or any of that. The only thing that excites me about phone numbers is that here's one property. I don't need a password for my phone number. Somehow, humanistically, I own that phone number. Nobody else can grab it from me. Somehow, it's not that they can hack it. I don't know how it's protected. It's not protected by my knowledge of a password. I might have a password for my phone, but there's no password for my phone number. My phone number is somehow, the government.
Badly, by the way. It's protected badly. Like SIM swapping attacks are increasingly a thing, particularly in the US, because it's very easy to buy a new SIM, convince the phone company that you're the same, that I'm Greg, that this is my new phone, my new SIM card, that I've lost my old SIM card. They'll transfer your phone number to my phone, and then I use that to reset your Gmail password and steal all your money. And this is an active thing that happens a lot. So,
well, that's the bad news and the good news, because okay, who can port your Gmail address?
Just us, right?
You can't.
Well,
you can't port your Gmail address.
Sure.
Can you port your phone number? Yes, you can.
No, wait, quote my Gmail address?
Pardon me?
Are you asking if I can quote my Gmail address?
No, port it.
Oh.
Can you move your Gmail address to Twitter or Facebook? No.
Fair enough.
You can port your number, your telephone number from AT&T, Verizon, blah, blah, blah. That is a big factor in pushing the control to the end user. So,
For what it's worth, I really agree with you. I had a conversation with the Blue Sky people where they were talking about exactly this property and how much they want that for the system that they're building. So the idea is that there's two levels. There's the idea of having an identity, which is associated with the public key and whatnot. And then as a user, I can delegate and say, no, actually, I want my name to now be pointing at this different server over here, which is the authority on my behalf. And then you can use your same identity and move it between different providers. DNS obviously provides this as well, that I can register a domain name and then point it wherever I want. So I own josephg.com, for example, and I used to use Gmail and now I use Fastmail, and no one needs to know that when they email me. So I agree with you that that's definitely a desirable property. But yeah, I mean, we could obviously do that with strings as well, but yeah.
Yeah, and the IndieWeb does that too. They have a system called IndieAuth, and their mantra is, as long as you own your own domain, that's decentralized enough for them, because you can always point your DNS records at anything you want. And so then you can port, but you have to own the DNS record.
Yeah, I think there's something that has to be owned in the same way that you kind of own a phone number, but don't own your Gmail address, but you do own your domain name. So I certainly hear that point.
Well, that's just a little taste.
Cool.
Yeah.
And what I would ask you to consider is, what would your CRDT and OT initiatives look like if you had an authoritative directory that could house state as well as disparate addresses that create some harmony to it?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I don't have a problem with having a centralized authority for identity. I actually think that would probably work great. I think all of the good identity systems that we've ever made that work have a centralized identity, but then having centralized identity pointing at a distributed system, I think would work fantastically. That's my taste. I also really love, for what it's worth, I love the aesthetic of a phone number. Like, I really liked old school ICQ numbers, and like how they would get longer the later someone joined. That was great. And I'm now imagining if I ever made a fantasy console or something like that like wanted that kind of aesthetic, like for something like James's metaverse thing, I'm imagining users having numbers based on the order in which they registered and that being the primary identifier. That would be awesome.
Well, they can be incredibly valuable. So up until, I don't know when it was, the 90s, AT&T had 98% of the collect call market, which was worth billions back then when billions were worth something. And then MCI came along and took a number, 1-800-COLLECT, and they captured 60% of the collect call market with that number because people could remember it. So capturing the dance of the human friendly and the machine friendly can be incredibly powerful. So anyway, if nothing else, the group knows a little bit more about what my interests are. So
thanks. I really appreciated you presenting. Cool.
I'll just reflect. I appreciated learning about phone numbers and learning about the bureaucratic kind of like portability or the bureaucratic things that happen there and those failures, and also learning about the portability issue was very interesting to me too just now. Thanks for that, Jay.
Yeah.